Welcome to the Property Bible. This show was created for current property owners, people looking to purchase property, and for professionals in the industry. Hope you enjoy. Welcome back to the Property Bible. My name's Kimberly Ackerman. I'm a buyer's agent for Trelease Associates in Sydney. Today we're going to be talking about what is property equity and how to maximise that equity. I have a very special guest with me today, Mr. Aaron Christie-David from Atelier Wealth.
Thanks very much.
Welcome.
Yeah, great to be here.
It's nice to see you.
Yeah, you too.
We have been in touch for many years now.
Yeah, we have.
You were helping me with my very first investment property that I ever owned almost 10 years ago. However, we are debating how long ago that actually was.
I'm going to say that you bought it and then I helped you kind of review where you're at.
On.
Yeah, but it was very, very early in my broking days as well.
It was. But I've learned a lot from you over the last 6 to 10 years, I guess we'll say. And you've been in the mortgage space for about 6 years now.
Yeah.
You're in the banking space before that.
Yeah.
You were running Mortgage Choice. Do you want me to talk about that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We had a Mortgage Choice franchise for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And then, we kind of, I won't say outgrew it, but we kind of want to spread our wings a little bit and go somewhere in a different direction. So that's when we stepped out and start our own broking business. And
Atelier Wealth.
Atelier Wealth, and there's been no looking back since.
Definitely not. And you guys are doing a great job.
Oh, thanks very much.
You've been top 100 broker of the year 2 years in a row now.
Yeah, it's
right?
What would we say? I mean, there's 18,000 mortgage brokers across Australia,
Yep.
right? And so every broker has access to the exact same products, the exact same lenders. So I guess it's how do you do it differently in such a cluttered market? And I think for us, the only recipe to our success has been loving our clients and giving them great, honest feedback that we would take personally and do it ourselves. And that's where I think you and I have connected, which is
very much.
I think we both have a very similar view of the world. How do we push the boundaries personally, professionally, property-wise, call it the 3 Ps there, for example.
Yes.
And I think for us, that's where you and I probably got a really good bond, which is we probably see the world slightly differently and we don't want to take the status quo. No. And that is an ideal client, I think, for you and for us as well. Yeah.
I know that Atelier Wealth has won numerous awards over the last 4 years.
Thanks.
So congratulations.
Thank
on
you.
That.
Yeah.
Definitely doing something right. And you're definitely always helping me, both professionally and personally. So today I want to use that great knowledge that you have to go through the property equity space and what that kind of means for a lot of people out there that have no idea what equity is. We have this word get thrown around a lot and it sounds very sophisticated, equity, and it sounds great, but I really want to drill down today on what that actually is and how we can sort of use it to our best ability to maximize that as a property owner.
Yep.
Fantastic. So I guess to sort of kickstart that process, what is equity for people who don't know?
Yeah, in a property context, you've got what the current loan balance is and then what the property is worth, and then the equity is what the difference is between the loan and what the property is worth. So let's do an example. Let's say your property is worth $1 million and you've got a loan balance of $600,000.
Yep.
So the difference between that is $400,000 worth of equity.
There's multiple different types of equity. There's 2 different types of equity.
Yeah, you're right. So what you've got is total equity. So the total equity in that example is $400,000.
Okay.
Yep. What happens though is most people think they've got $400,000 total equity, but it's usable or available equity is what we're kind of really drilling home.
Which are very different things.
Correct. So that whole notion that the bank wants to keep that 20% deposit untouchable.
Yep.
So again, we go back to the example, it's $1 million property. You've now got up to $800,000 you can draw against that property, that property that you've got. So now the loan's $600,000. $200,000 is there as available equity for you to use. And I think a lot of my conversations has really revolved around, no guys, you have that is a total equity. However, available equity is 80% of the property value. Yeah.
And that's what you want in these kind of scenarios. You want to know what is your available equity, because in simple terms, equity can sometimes equal cash. Would you say?
Yeah, correct. And that's what you call like a cash out, or it's taken a few different forms. And that's where probably the banky words have kind of killed people's understanding of it, right? Complexity gets in the way. So you go, well, what have I got? You've got an equity loan that you can pull out.
Yep.
You've got a line of credit that you could pull out. And they also call it a cash out. So they're all very much interchangeable words, same but different, which is how much you can pull out against that property to either go towards renovation costs, towards buying another property, for example, funding an investment property purchase. Yep. So that's the different ways to use equity in your home or an investment property as well.
And I think equity or property equity itself ties in with capital growth.
Yes.
Because there are a couple of different ways for us to create equity. Equity is the amount of money that, the property has gained on its own or itself, and it's making you wealth over time.
Yeah.
So we want as much equity as possible, really.
We're always shooting for growth, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I think there's always been two schools of thoughts when it comes to investing. You're either investing for cash flow or capital growth. I guess
you can have both.
That's what we're trying to say. The holy grail is actually having
Holy
both,
grail,
right?
yeah.
As an investor, because you've got good cash flow, for example, the property's washing its face, as they like to say, so it's kind of covering its costs. The other one is it's increasing in value.
Yeah.
So the property starts to grow in value. It then gives you the ability to pull that equity out to then buy that next investment property, and that's that whole notion of leverage or piggybacking and being able to scale and build a property portfolio as well. So it's great when people have cash flow because they're going, well, it's not costing me anything. But if we're not seeing growth on the asset, it's great, but it's limiting. Cash flow is
such a small amount.
Right.
Might be a few $100s a month that you're making from a positive cash flow perspective.
And it's funny because we're going into a different space here altogether, but when you talk positive cash flow, now you've got a tax implication because you're paying tax on the gains that you're making on the cash flow. A lot of people try to invest in property, to get wealth through property, but also tax effectiveness. And if you're making cash flow through property, you're now kind of going to get stung with some extra tax. But that's a great problem to have nonetheless, right? It means you're making money.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're kind of getting the top skimmed off the money that you're already making, so to say.
Yeah.
But look, and feel free to disagree with me when I say this, but I have always believed that there's two major ways to create equity.
Yeah.
We want to create equity because we're creating wealth without putting any money into it, so to say.
Yep.
So if you buy a property for $1 million, for example, the LVR portion of that is 80%. So you've got an $800,000 loan on that property. Now, to create equity in that property, usable equity, in my mind, and you might have some other ideas, but you've got your general capital growth, which is as the market grows, that property is now worth 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. All of a sudden you have all this equity in this property, but you can also force that growth through things like renovations or other capital improvements you're doing to the property as well. Are there any other ways that we could look at creating equity?
Yeah, look, there's another cheeky way, which is valuations as well. And I think you and I, we've always spoken about this, which is, I think it's one of the most underrated parts, which is property valuations. Yeah. And so you can, and traditionally with renovations, you've got the idea to spend $1, you get $1. Now the goal is spend $1, get $2, for example, right?
So they have to be efficient, the renovations.
Very. And I mean, all that gives you DIY'd one of your properties, right? So great way to kind of cut costs. Some people that are at trades, wonderful. Some people buy under market value, then they can do the renovation costs. Great. It's a great way to accelerate those gains as well. Beautiful. But let's say, for example, like most investors, they go, okay, look, I'll lick a paint, fresh carpets, for example, tidy the bedrooms, bathrooms up and blinds, and great, you get the depreciation on that tick. But then how do you get that real significant uplift in the growth, which is kind of what we're talking about here, which is the core of getting more equity out of your property?
Because it's all very relative to so many different factors thrown in the mix. Talking about the valuations part, which is like my favorite part to talk about, because I'm really always just pushing your buttons when it comes to ramping things up and seeing how hard we can basically push it when it comes to that side of things.
And these are what I call like the these are the investors that push the boundaries. Yourself, I reckon there's a handful of clients that are very similar that go, no, keep going.
Yeah.
And I love it because it challenges us.
Yeah,
I just don't want someone to take my word for it.
Not a
Challenge
pain in the
me
arse.
as well. No, not at all. Pain in the ass is when they don't say please or thank you.
Okay.
That's just
No,
how
I
it
always
works,
say please or
right?
thank you.
Exactly. So we'll talk about in that context, which is how many banks have we got access to as brokers? I'm going to say 30.
Okay.
Right, as a round number. Off the back of that, I'd probably say that at least half give brokers access to what we call upfront valuations. Okay, so that's like a gateway. It's like an online system that I put in your address, the property address, and then it will determine if it's going to trigger what we call a full valuation or if it's going to take what they call a desktop valuation. So understanding valuations. So there's 3 valuations: desktop, computer-based,
online, yep.
curbside, which is where the valuer drives past the property but doesn't actually ever go in. Pretty much just to show the bank that yes, the property exists.
Okay.
Tick. And then they call a full valuation where they actually go through the property, produce a full 3, 4, 5 page report, and take photos of the property as well. Okay.
And if I can just say something
Go for it.
to if there's anyone out there that's sort of not keeping up with this train of thought that we're going through, is that the valuations that you can get done, that where a bank comes back to you and says, this $1 million property is actually worth $1.2 million. All of a sudden you've got $200,000 equity, usable equity.
You got 200,000 total equity.
Total equity.
And then we go up to 80% against the 1.2.
Depending on where your LVR is.
What the existing loan
so to
balance
say.
is. Yeah, spot
exactly.
on. Really spot on.
But you've got that additional, just from them giving a new figure or a new market price of that property, which is kind of wild. It can happen pretty quickly as well.
Very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much. So, and it's unique because we're in a property market where it's accelerating so quick. So I could do valuations 6 months ago to now, and we're going to see a huge uplift in property prices.
Yeah.
Right. So it's almost like you couldn't save that quickly enough that your property's gone up in value. They've got equity to pull out of it, which is wonderful. Right? It's an investor's best friend, equity. So I think where we're really, I think the point that you and I are trying to hit home is valuations are subjective.
Very much
right?
so.
So you take a bank. Well, I had a good example. We did a property up in Brisbane just recently, freestanding home, probably about 3 k's out of Brisbane, and the owner insisted that it was probably worth about $650. Okay. So what we could do in the valuation system is we could put the valuation for about maybe $685.
Okay.
Right.
When you ordered the valuation.
Yeah, when we order the val.
Yeah.
Okay. Off the back of that, we know that number because we've run a property report, so a bank estimate, and then we see what the range is. So the banks, when you see those like CoreLogic RP data reports, they've got a range and say the midpoint is here.
Not always accurate.
Not accurate, especially in the current, in a fast-paced market.
Sure.
And then we know that there's the midpoint, and then there's like what we call like a standard deviation. So again, there's like a little range that you can go to above it. And so if I was to say that property's worth $750, it'd just rebound all the way back to its kind of midpoint. Yep. But if I can kind of go nudge up, and get it to like just shy, maybe
just
690.
enough so it doesn't ricochet back,
right?
Kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it becomes like a little game sometimes for us to go look.
It's a game to me.
How much can we push that valuation up within reason to go? Okay, yep. There's comparable sales to support it, and then if it's a computer-based valuation that we're after, the desktop value is what we're calling it. We know that we've got that confidence that we go, okay, yep, 685 is a good number, and then we can lend against that 685. Now, the challenge is when you get to 685 and they say we want a full val, right? So full valuation, meaning a valuer goes out there, we risk that maybe the value doesn't see it at 685 and they come back in at 650.
Which will trump any desktop or curbside val.
So the higher, so the desktop will be overridden by a curbside. The curbside will be overridden by a full valuation.
Right.
Yeah. So it's understanding, and then we can cancel a full val as well.
Yeah.
Right. We can cancel a full valuation. It probably just means that we strike that lender out.
Yes.
So again, what we're trying to say here is it's not about the interest rate.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the interest rate. If you're getting $80,000 on a better valuation, that's far more powerful than 0.05% on an interest rate.
I'm a big believer.
There we go.
Completely. I mean, but after all these years, I will push and push and push for a higher valuation on these properties. We've got 6-7 valuations done in different banks for some of my investment properties because I wanted to push to see how high can these banks go and give me a valuation that is higher than any other of the other banks. And the higher the bank valuation, I don't really give a shit what kind of interest rate they're going to give me.
Yep.
If they're going to give me an extra 50 grand of equity, I don't care if I'm paying another point or 2% more.
Because the upside on the property is far more than the rate. That's what I'm trying to tell clients is don't worry about the rate. The performance on the property is going to far outweigh your interest rate difference on the cheapest versus what we're going to get you for this property as well. And that's a journey. Some people will get it faster than others, particularly when they've maybe missed out on, they go, I could have bought that property. And it's like, we hung on to rate and now you didn't get the borrowing capacity or you didn't get the equity to fund it as well. So I think some people will go on that journey. Some people by nature are probably a little bit more conservative. My role, as I see it, is to give you those options and to push the boundaries for you to go, well, you've got the ability to, whether you decide to pull the trigger or not, it's very much up to yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
But our job is to get you there to make those educated decisions as well. And that's very similar to what you do as a buyer's agent, going, here's what you can buy, here's what you could buy. And then someone has to sleep at night with the decisions that they've made as well, isn't it?
Yeah, just give them the information really.
Yeah.
But I mean, going through that equity space, equity is really just the secondary step. You know, people have to have a mortgage first to start off with. They've got to own a property first to be able to create equity. And you can, don't get me wrong, you can jump in and buy a property and have instant equity in some special cases. I know that's happened with some clients that I've bought for in the past. But it's good to know that there are these 3 different areas where you can push and create equity quite easily. I've gotten valuations through you in the span of a few months and made tens of thousands of dollars just by shopping around for valuations. And most people don't know that you can shop around for valuations. To begin with.
So most people don't know they have to get a valuation ordered up front, right? And I'm like, well, the first question I ask is, how much is it going to cost? I'm like, you've asked that question, no offense, but you probably missed the point here. One, okay, valuations don't cost a thing. So don't worry about that but nothing ventured, nothing gained either. And so if you're not ordering vals, if you're not getting your property revalued, if you're not trying to tap into the equity, it's sitting there. And you're going to look backwards at some point going, I was sitting on equity. And this is probably why, this is exactly why I got into broking, because my parents did the right thing. They bought a property, they paid it off, and they sat on all that equity. And maybe they didn't know, right? Came to the country, did the right thing, paid off the loan as fast as possible.
A lot of people talk about that though, especially maybe the old school generation,
very much.
So to say. Our parents and their parents.
They drilled it into us, right? Like,
pay
get a
down
loan,
your loan.
paid off as fast as possible. And so then what happens is, it's wonderful behavior because you're paying the loan off quicker. But now what happens is the loan's coming down, the value's going up, and now you've got all this equity that's not being used. And it's like, I don't want to risk my home and drawing out equity to go buy an investment property. And again, that's maybe one of those limiting beliefs that people have got about mortgage and the product as itself. It's going, if I buy an investment property, then my home is secured. It's like, no, it's not. It's
a psychological process to go through very much. I mean, I'm a firm believer in using debt to create wealth. Some of the most wealthiest people in the world are in the largest amount of debt, if not worse off than that. Some of them go bankrupt. I mean, Donald Trump has gone bankrupt multiple times. You have to think, well, these people aren't using their savings to create wealth. They're using borrowed money to invest and to create and build businesses and do all these sorts of things. And the same sort of thing with property. I think it's really important to, if you're comfortable to do so, of course, not everybody is.
No.
But
and again,
maximize it as much as you can.
Using your savings to pay an investment property, it's maybe for the first one, but then trying to use equity after that, because from a tax effectiveness point of view, you're missing out on the interest you can claim on using borrowed funds to invest. So again, working with an accountant, making sure the loan structures are correct, making sure that some people call it debt recycling. It's very much a financial planning term, for example. But if you get past the terminology and go, what are we trying to do here? Hold back your cash, use your cash to pay off your home loan, for example, and then try and fund an investment property through using equity or borrowed funds as well. And if
that's
we can
how people
plain
build.
English, we can tell that in plain English.
Yes.
I think mission accomplished for you and I as well.
And look, it's much easier said than done, obviously, and it takes time. Property is a long-term game, but that's how people build portfolios generally. They They buy that first one, they create equity, whatever way they can. They pull out that equity, use that as a deposit for the next one. That one creates equity. They pull that out, use it for the next one, and all of a sudden you're getting what's called compounding equity, where all three of those properties that you've bought now are creating equity at the same time. So twice or three times as quickly, you're going to be able to get the next one and the next one and the next one. So I guess just to wrap up everything we've discussed today, I could talk all day to you about equity.
We certainly could.
Love equity. But I really want to give people some tips that they can use or some pointers to take from all of that information and take away with them about how they can really maximize on the equity that's potentially in their properties at the moment.
Yeah, okay. Perfect.
I guess some of those points are, shop around for valuations.
Absolutely.
If you're using a broker, it's going to make it 10 times easier as well. A mortgage broker, they're going to be able to go to all the banks.
Just ask who does upfront valuations with no charge.
Yeah. And you can get 3 different types of valuations. If the first one doesn't come up where you like it, you can push back and try and get higher and higher and really push those boundaries if it's in you and if you have that kind of risk appetite about you and time as well to go through this process. I think another one is focus on that equity amount or the total value of the property that the banks are giving you and not the interest rates necessarily that they're offering.
Rate is good.
Rate is good.
But equity is great is kind of what everyone's supposed to catch cry. Yeah.
Especially if your next goal is to get the next property and you need that cash in order to put it down towards a deposit. Forget about the interest rates for the time being if that is the case. You'll be able to change them down the track, refinance with other banks. There's a whole different myriad of ways that you can change the interest rates themselves. Another thing is understand what the valuers are looking for.
Spot on.
Which is a big one.
So if you're going for full valuations, what is the valuer looking for? So when I speak to valuers, they're looking for pretty much cleanliness of the property, well maintained. They're not looking at the melee appliances or whatever it is.
No.
Appliances can come and go, a bit like landscaping. Landscaping can come and go. They're looking at what they can compare that to another property. So it's specs. Is it 3 bed, 2 bath, 1 car?
Yes.
Is that the most popular type of property in the area? Suburbia, 4 bed, 2 bath, 2 car. If it's a 4 bed, 1 bath, you can't compare that to a 4 bed, 2 bath. So again, don't get attached to what your property is worth. The valuer is going to look and say, what are the comparables in the last 6 months that have sold for exact specs? So if you're on a better street, for example, if you've got more land size, for example, this is what makes a property superior. So it's kind of focusing on the big picture. Very much. Don't get caught up in the detail. Like, look how beautiful my tiles are.
No,
they do not care.
They don't care. Unless you're putting those tiles in because you're going to live in the place and you want it to look a certain way. Then think about those options. But if you're looking at from a boosting equity perspective, try and think big picture of what is the big things that are going to matter. Changing those specs. Having a brand new kitchen or a brand new bathroom, those are going to be big ticket items for some of these valuers going through these properties. And another thing is really just, and this is one of my tips, Aaron, and again, I'm not in the finance space, but just as from an investor perspective, I really encourage people to monitor the market. And if you're seeing that the market is peaking and properties around your area or around the area of the properties that you own are going for a premium, I would encourage you to get a valuation done while the market is at that peak. Because if you've created all this equity in a short amount of time, you could potentially draw out that equity, dump it into your offset account. So it's offsetting the interest. It's like you haven't even done anything or changed anything. You're not paying higher repayments because that same amount.
Used it,
But you've pulled it out and it's accessible. And I think the good thing about that is if the market does drop, which it does, it goes up and down all the time, the banks can't claw that equity back, which people don't know.
It, exactly. You've got it there as well. And that almost feeds in perfectly to like the whole loan structure, which is if you're fixed and you need to get a valuation from another bank, fixing is very popular at the moment, but it's restrictive because if you want to switch banks to get a better valuation, you can't move and you can't pull. So you're limited to that one bank and their valuation as well. So again, it's just understanding, a little bit of thought needs to go into what are you doing and why are you doing it. Anyway,
I love talking to you about this stuff because I like looking outside the square and
Yeah.
like you said earlier, like looking at just what's possible.
Yeah.
Maybe not what is the norm, but pushing the boundaries of what's possible to
Yeah.
put people in a better position moving forward and looking outside the normal scope
No, I
of
love
those
it,
things.
Kieran. That's what we're trying to do, is lead people on a journey where they can learn what their options are, what those options mean for them, and then they can make an educated decision at that point as well.
Definitely. Well, thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Aaron, thanks for coming in and
Pleasure.
talking about this. I'm sure there'll be a bunch of other topics that we can talk on through different episodes, but
Definitely.
I loved talking about this and going through these things.
Great.
I hope that everyone that is listening and watching has learnt something from this episode. I know that I have, and I continue to do so. So please tune in for the next episode of the Property Bible and our next topic coming up soon. Thanks.